Thank you very much for having me here with you. It's a pleasure to be here in this conference in Argentina. I wish we could have other Brazilians sharing these moments here with you. I think it's so good that we can be together in South America, in Latin America, not only Spanish-speaking people, but also Brazilians like me, sharing with you the knowledge of how to deal with teaching and learning possibilities in the world. I'm very happy, and I love to be with people who think that they can change the world through education. And I wish that together we can share some moments here with this talk in which we can think about ways to transform and to see hope for the future. So my idea is not to think about answers to questions. In a way, I think we always ask too many questions and we find very few answers. But I hope that we can share some of the answers that people around the places where I work have been thinking about. So that's what I'm going to present today. Some of the issues that people have been thinking about and how they have been reflecting and trying to change their worlds by trying. And I think that if there is something that we Brazilians have learned through the experience of having very tough times, is that we have to try and try and try and keep trying. And by doing this, perhaps we can find better ways of living. And that's something we have been also achieving. So when I proposed this talk, real-life activities as the basis for teaching in multilingual context, I didn't think about what Henrique told yesterday about multilingual. I thought about a perspective of plurilingualism in the terms that he mentioned. I think about the world as a place where multicultural perspectives should be together, should be a way for people to overcome their differences and to find new grounds to grow and to create new possibilities for existing. And in order to do this, what I brought today for you was an attempt to find ground. So if you see any problems in my slides, I am sorry. I am a Brazilian, Portuguese-speaking person, and I'm speaking English with slides in Spanish. So you can see that I'm doing a very hard job here today. So, well, anyway, you're going to see I will try my best. My objective today is to discuss with you some of the attempts that people in Brazil who work with bilingual or multilingual contexts have been trying to do in order to overcome the barrier, the frontiers that people create in schools and the way they kind of put schools very much apart from real life. So how can you bring real life in schools and how can you take schools to real life? So how can you articulate the contents that you see in schools with the things that you do in your real life? And how can you make this a possibility for changing the world? Some questions are raised for reflection. The first question is, can I think about life, the life that we live as Marx and Engels used to talk about? Or do we think about the mind as the place where teaching and learning occurs? Many times we only reflect about teaching and learning as a mental thing, but aren't we preparing students to live in a very broad sense? So how can we end this separation between life and school? The second question is, how can we deal with values in school? How can values be part of what we do when we are teaching? The third one would be, how can we put teachers together? We are here at a conference that deals with foreign second language teaching, but we have math teachers, science teachers, well, so many other things that are taught at school. How do we connect with them to create the things that happen in school and turn these into something that changes the lives of our students? How do we break these frontiers? How do we deal with the mental functions, as Vygotsky used to say, with the mental operations in a way that they become not isolated things in the mind of the students, but part of what makes them move towards acting? How do we think about things of mental processes as going beyond the simple reproduction of knowledge that was already created by someone else? How can I think about procedures in classrooms that go beyond the simple repetition of types of activities that are repeated throughout methods that happen in the past and that we keep reproducing? And finally, how can we evaluate the process of learning, and how can students perceive their process of development? These are some of the questions that I plan to address today. Well, when I talk, I like to talk and illustrate my talk with real-life situations, just as I'm speaking. So I tried. I don't know if it's going to work. I had a hard time trying to see if my videos would work, because I work with a Mac. I hope they do. But I tried to bring some videos to illustrate what I'm talking about. So I will address them theoretically, but I will try to illustrate them with some videos from real classes. Of course, they are snapshots of things that happen in classes. All the videos I'm going to show you, they are not examples of or models of what you should do or should not do. They are simple examples of things that people are trying hard to do in order to change the world. And they were chosen by the teachers who are performing in these videos as moments that were important for their thinking about their practices. And they decided that they could share these with other people so that other people could also learn from them. So see these videos not as examples of good or bad practices, but as pieces of or gifts of reflection for you, okay? So let's see. I brought this because this is very carioca, just as I am. I don't know if you've been to Rio before, but perhaps you plan to go to Rio in 2006. So if you are, be ready, because people are getting prepared and learning English in the favelas. I don't know if you can understand, but up there on the blackboard, it's written, English course, but in a very poor Portuguese. And then they say, towards 2016. And then in an attempt to use phonetic transcription, a kind of phonetic transcription, how to teach these guys that you see there, how to steal people on the streets. So you have there, give me the money, boy. You lost it, playboy. Shut up, girl. And the guy is saying, the order now is to learn English, to do well in the Olympics, when we have to go there and steal from the foreigners. So you may think, well, this is horrible. We are talking about people who are planning to steal from the foreigners. But in a way, we can think about EFL or ESL or people who plan and see English as a means towards something. Of course, I'm not advocating towards this, but at least this is a way to reflect about teaching as applied to what people need for their lives, although this is not exactly what we expect. But I can guarantee that in the school schools, the way of teaching English that we do in Brazil many times, do not call the attention as much as this normally does. So, when we think about teaching, we should rely, and that's something that we think of in the projects that we deal with in Brazil. We should reflect about what is it that we do in life? Who are the people and what are the systems that organize our lives? Who are the subjects? What are the instruments that they deal with? What are the objects that they are constructing? What's the role that they use to live? What are the communities in which they participate? What are the division of labor and which results they want to achieve? And how do these come to the school in order to organize the way the curriculum is prepared and thought of? In a way, how do we think about social activities in which students are engaged in their real lives? And how do we structure what we teach in order to prepare students to go beyond the simple fact that they are learning verb tenses, that they are learning subtractions and addition? How do we deal with this in order to move students to an objective in life, to not an utilitarian objective, but a means to participate? How do we teach artifacts to live? That's what Marx used to mean when he said, how do we think about philosophy as philosophy of the life that we live? So, we move to the next question. If we are thinking about teaching, having in mind the life that we live, we have to think about the values that we work with. And in a sense, we have to think about which values we work with and how do they allow participation in the world. And the question is, what is the context that we have, and what is the context, and what is the reality that we want? Conte Sponville uses to say that we cannot want what we don't know. Kids from the favelas where we work with, they don't know many things, so they can't want what they don't know. If you don't know different realities from the one you live with, you cannot aim anything that you don't know. So we need at school to provide kids with opportunities to see, to experience different realities from the ones they are used to, so they can aim, aspire to something else. And how do we create possibilities for these? Not only for learning, cognitively speaking, but for wanting something else. Once I was at the school, and I said, what do you dream about? And then the kid asked me, like 11-year-old, can I dream? Am I allowed? It's very sad when a kid does not know even how to dream about something. And how do our classes allow kids to dream about futures? So, if we are doing that, how can we do it alone? Loneliness in schools is something that Paulo Freire used to say that is the worst problems in school. We feel lonely. We don't have anyone to talk about. We are afraid of teaching. We are afraid of what's going to happen, of how we are going to deal with certain problems. But still, we don't know whom to talk to. But we are alone, and we don't know how to deal with that. How do we break these frontiers of different areas and do things together? How do we integrate what we work with? How do we take knowledge from different compartments and put them together? How do we challenge the linear ways in which knowledge is set? How do we work in different contexts? I will show an example of this with a project developed by some students, some teachers from a school, in which they worked with environmental problems through debates. They worked with different area contents, and they tried to join languages and natural sciences, and they put together with the objective of working with different, creating different ways of acting towards the environment, and at the same time learning argumentative possibilities and learning about the environment. In order to do that, they taught the kids how to make speeches, how to organize demonstrations, and at the same time, how to discuss environmental problems. And you're going to see the results in the process that the kids went through. They studied math things, they worked with arts, and then they exercised within the school premises the demonstration things. Let's see how these happen. Oops, sorry. Hopefully.
Debería sonar.
Sorry. Sounded okay.
This and this, and then we do this calculation in the thing. Now you understand? Where's your thing? This we do like these three. We represent drawing and the calculation.
Just being wise, reduce global warming. I can't hear you. Reduce global warming. Growing trash and the being doing much, much more, making it a better place for the human race. Reduce global warming. Plant the trees. Let's plant trees. Let's plant trees.
Of course, this is a common school performance, but the important thing is these kids were learning to present their opinions and to state what they think. This happened 3 years ago, and these kids are now 17. I guess we had the demonstrations in Brazil this year. Perhaps some of them were the ones on the streets. I don't know if this was a result of that or not. Perhaps yes, perhaps no. But certainly, this made a difference for the lives of these kids and for the lives of the kids who were there, because they learn to present. Well, the principal of this school says that it makes a difference for her, because they always complain about problems and issues in school, and they do make revolutionary acts in the school. So, how do we deal with the mental processes, with the mental functions? So the question now is, how do we think about the aims and the processes that we plan for teaching? The question here is, what are the mental functions that we deal with? In a Piagetian perspective, we used to think that mental functions were already there. We simply had to put the student in contact with knowledge, and through the stages of development, these mental functions would, by having a maturation process, they would develop and students would appropriate this knowledge. In the Vygotskian process and perspective, these mental processes are not innate. They need to be developed. They need to be worked with. The teacher needs to somehow exercise with the students processes of metacognition that and sharing and discussing how they are learning. In a way, learning something and learning how to learn something work together. So the way I discuss with my friend about something is a process that I will internalize, and the process that I had with this friend or with my teacher is going to turn into a process that I have with myself. So mental processes are external processes that turn into internal processes. How do I do this? How do I transform something that is internal into something which is external, into something that is internal? How do I think about processes, not only in terms of reproduction, but how do I think about analytical, about critical processes? How do I plan classes that go beyond simple recognition of things? How do I think about distinguishing things, comparing things, differentiating things, but beyond? How do I think about processes like participating, reading critically, using concepts in math, for example? How do I think about things that go beyond simple recognition? I'll show you the idea that when we think about processes, we cannot simply think about what we do as part of an exercise of making students repeat, but as a possibility for going to the beyond what you do. In order to think about it, there are certain aspects that we consider important from a social historical perspective. The first one would be what Vygotsky used to call the double movement. What is it to say that we work with double movement? Double movement has to do with thinking about learning process as a contextualized process. In the video that you saw, students were learning about concepts in math, in social studies, in science, in different areas, in languages. But they learned this in order to do the demonstrations, in order to participate in that act. So they departed from needs and interests in real life in order to learn. By doing that, they departed from what they already knew. They departed from what they already had some experience with. And from that, they started to deal with what was new, the scientific concepts. And together, scientific knowledge and everyday knowledge interweave in a way that can make it into a new concept that puts together everyday and scientific knowledge. This double movement leads students to think about what they are learning not as something from school, but something that can transform what they do every day in their lives. The other aspect that we deal with is the zone of proximal development, which is a very famous one, but to a certain extent, people create too many ideas about this, but in practice, when they apply it, sometimes it's just, I will give students an exercise that is more difficult than he can, and then I will give him some help on how to do it. And the zone of proximal development goes farther beyond this. Well, sorry. The zone of proximal development, as Vygotsky stated, can be seen as this difference between what I am and what I am becoming. In a way, as Lois Hosman puts it, when I start in a process of learning, I can do things on my own in a certain way. When I'm together with other people, trying to work through some activities, I'm challenged to go beyond what I can. But I cannot do it on my own. So I have to exercise working with other people in order to go beyond what I already know. This exercise of trying to go beyond myself and being what I am not makes me do more than I can. And this is the distance between what I can do now and what I will do in the future. Because by doing with the other, little by little, I start doing by myself. So the things that I can do now with the other becomes things that I can do on my own. But for this to happen, Vygotsky says that I need to do it through crisis. And how can crisis be created? Crisis is created through a process of debate. People need to engage in discussions about the processes of learning. They need to go through attempts to try and connect with the other and create possibilities of seeing things in different perspectives. When people feel different possibilities in a multicultural way, they will understand that more than one possibility to see things is possible. So, if I say that something is this way, but you say that something is in another way, it's not enough to create a new possibility. In order for this to be possible, I need to support what I think, and you need to understand what I'm saying. You need to see the way I see, and I need to see the way you see. You need to understand my perspective. You need to view the world from the perspective that I see, and I need to view the world from the perspective that you see, so that we can make it possible for us to see in a different and new way. So argumentation is a possibility for that, because people have to connect and create new. Of course, argumentation can create oppositions, but in a collaborative way, argumentation aims at creating possibilities for the new, for people to create something that is different from what they think into something new. So they have to explain, they have to define, they have to give opportunity for other possibilities. Finally, we have performance. Performance is a way of playing with the world, not the way it is, but the way it can be. During performance, people can learn to play with realities. And Vygotsky used to say that in play, you have two things, imagination and rules. Through imagination, you can Imagine you can get to anywhere, you can create anything, you can do whatever you want. But through rules, you control your imagination and you connect to reality. This contradiction creates possibility for learning. Because at the same time, the kid is learning that they can create whatever they want, but that he has to control this creation. So when we propose that the kid creates in the classroom something that is part of the world outside the school and try to reproduce in the classroom something related to the world outside the school, which is not normally part of his reality, he is imagining something, but at the same time, he is following some rules of reality. So the knowledge, the scientific knowledge, acts in a way as the rules for the play. And the imagination opens up for doing with this knowledge new things that will connect them to reality. In a way, kids end up by experiencing, not only cognitively, but emotionally, with knowledge and with real life inside school. And by doing so, they experience what Vygotsky called perejivanie, which is an emotional and cognitive experience that touches you profoundly and changes who you are, not only what you know. Well, in order to talk about this, I also brought to you an example of a class in which the students are learning Spanish now. In this class, they are performing how to discuss about, it's a forum. These kids are learning to participate in forums, to debate also about recyclable objects and how they will do it. So here you see the teacher disappears from the whole context and the students are debating. Hope you can understand their Spanish.
Alexandre Birman, un empresario, Guilherme Lima, un estudiante de sociología contemporánea, Julia Marques, una experta en coches, y Luana, una ingeniera.
As bolsas reutilizáveis. Hoje em dia utilizam muitas bolsas, mais de 2,5 milhões. Esse número não é no Brasil e não é em um ano, é no estado de São Paulo e no mês. E solução são as bolsas reutilizáveis, que evitam o desperdício, facilita a carga de compras e ajuda o meio ambiente acima de tudo. Utilice.
¿Cuánto pulsan los vehículos eléctricos? Un vehículo eléctrico.
Depende del vehículo.
En media.
En media, los vehículos eléctricos están, el precio está bajando para dar acceso a más personas, pero es un precio alto.
Yo pienso que el vehículo eléctrico es mejor que el vehículo movido a gasolina, pero yo pienso que el vehículo eléctrico gasta muy energía.
As you can see, now I'm changing to Portuguese, sorry. As you could see, the students are trying not to use their Spanish in order to participate. And the nice thing is that they're discussing and they're not focusing on the teacher as the main person who is conducting the class. They're talking to each other and questioning and discussing and leading the activity, because that's a play activity in which they see themselves as participants creating the reality. Well, finally, how can we think about this as a process that we are evaluating? How can we let the students think about the way they are learning? If this is a process that you see participation in the world, how can we evaluate the way we are participating in the world. It's not an easy task. So there are the usual types of evaluation. Like you do diagnostic things, you do the formative ones, you do the official ones, the ones that you go there and you evaluate formally with tests. But most of the time, the important thing is for students to perceive the process as a process of engagement. So all the time, in the formative way of evaluating, we think that it's essential that students see this process as a process in which he can feel his participation in the world, and he can evaluate this by noticing the way he started his participation through the needs he felt. So, since the beginning, the students evaluate and see what they need in order to be in the world. Every time a student starts a project with, like these ones that we showed here, they will try to participate and see how they would be a member of that activity. Yesterday, Gabriel talked about peripheral participation that Lev and Wenger talk about. These students learn in a peripheral participation, and from periphery, they move to the center. This movement is a movement of acquiring knowledge in order to become to be in the central position. How can you turn from periphery to the center? How can you see yourself as a member of the community? So you're going to see one more video in which the teacher organizes an evaluation in a completely different way. She's both evaluating what they know about food and eating habits, and also the thing about ecology and so on, and their possibilities to use argumentation as a tool for discussions. And she creates an Oprah episode in her class in which she is Oprah. And you're going to see. She provided the students with a text. And with this text that you're going to see now, all the students had to read the text, and they had to prepare themselves to participate in this Oprah episode. I mean, this Oprah event, whatever. And some of them were interviewers, others were the audience, and she was Oprah. And they had to participate. This was filmed, and then they would evaluate what they used in terms of knowledge, how they read the text, and this was part of the evaluation. You are going to see just parts of it. So the question...
When they calculated the 80% that the greenhouse gas emissions emit, because on the meat production, actually it was calculated in a different way, because they said it's a larger share for the greenhouse gases than transportation. But they calculated the share from transportation and the share from the 80% of the meat production in a different way. So I don't think we should trust that calculations as well. And also, I don't think that we should tell citizens and people that care about the environment that...
I really do think the subject of stop eating meat or producing it, it's not so good, but it's part of our diet, so we need meat to have all the nutrients in our bodies. So, and people really do like it. So we have to have a balance, and that's enough. So are any of you suggesting that we all become vegetarians?
No, I'm suggesting the contrary.
Let's hear from Ms. Martin, our scientist.
Well, actually, as we know, America is one of the countries that produce more, that have more fast food places where you can eat and stuff. So if we just kind of decrease our consumption, not stop eating at all, but just eating less meat, it would help to reduce global warming. And that's not the only factor. There are a lot of other ones that can also help.
Okay, so as you see, it's a very unusual way of evaluating because you cannot control what they are saying or what they are doing. But actually, you can see a lot about their efforts to participate by using what they are learning. It's not that you eliminate the other types of learning, but it's that you use different ways of dealing with knowledge and learning and evaluation. So what are the contributions that these ways of thinking and these reflections have brought to people? First of all, the idea is that we can think about these ways of reflecting about teaching as a way of introducing student in the transformation of their realities. Besides that, it implies that knowledge that is kept by all generations is not something to be reproduced, but it's something to be dealt with, recreated, and transformed into something that becomes part of my everyday knowledge. And most of all, it's something that has to create perejivanie, something that has to create an emotional and cognitive experience that students can take with them throughout their lives and that they can remember as something that changes who they are into who they will become. I hope that the experience of FAAPI can be for you a perejivanie. It's been a perejivanie for me in these last 2 days, and I hope it will still be throughout these last 2 days. Thank you very much.